Well, welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my brother, friend, and partner, South Dakota's favorite son, co-host extraordinaire, Wes Brown.
Hey, Todd. I don't know about favorite son. There may be some people lining up to object to that, but I'll take it. All right, South Dakota, I hope you're all listening. I'm your favorite son. We're here for another episode of the Tenant Podcast. I'm so excited. Today's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited about our guests today, but I'll let you do the intros. So how you doing, Todd? Anything fun today?
Just podcasting with you, brother, and that's about it. Enjoying a little bit of the spring weather that we're having here in Denver.
Yeah, it was beautiful here in Rapid City too. So got outside, got to take a drive, and my wife and I went and looked at some other cars just so you wouldn't get haggled. I do that on a Sunday. Otherwise, you're there forever. Fever. That's right. Yeah, Love it. Yep. All right. So before we get started today, I want to take a moment and acknowledge our media sponsor, New Magazine. That's NUE. New recently put out the winter issue of New Denver, and you can find the link to the issue on the Tenant Facebook page, along with the link to their new 2021 arts issue. Or if you're on Instagram, you can follow the new national edition at new_magazine. And the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. Thank you, New, for your support. And we're going to get right into it. We're going to talk some art. Art thou ready, Wes Brown? I am.
You see what I did there?
Yeah. Art thou ready? I am thou ready. You confused me.
I know. I caught you off guard.
I thought I was hearing God for a second there. Art thou ready? Yes, God, I am ready to join you if that's your wishes.
Oh, man. Our guest this week is the phenomenal artist and ninth wonder of the world, Annie Decamp. Annie is an incredibly prolific mixed media artist, and her works are absolutely stunning. If you are able, I highly encourage you to experience them in person, either by stopping by one of her open studios that she hosts, or checking out one of her current or upcoming exhibits. And for those of you that are not able to experience her work firsthand, please check out Annie's work on her website, anniedecamp.com. That's ANNIEDECAMPART. Annie, thank you so much for spending time with us today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good. I need to catch my breath now.
I heard you want to topple the eighth wonder of the world and go right up the line. So
I wanted number 9. It's a good number.
Number 9 is a good number.
I'm in the club now, I guess.
You are in the club.
Officially.
Wonders of the World Club.
That's awesome.
We'll have to hashtag that. You should put that on your also on your about page that you are the officially the ninth wonder of the world.
Absolutely using that. Don't laugh.
There'll be billboards like wall drug billboards in Cleveland saying visit the ninth wonder of the world at Annie Decamp Art.
Yeah, I might be making a T-shirt that says that. I just might be wearing it down. You never know.
That's awesome.
I love that idea. As you're driving through Kansas, headed towards Denver, we could have billboards with Annie's picture up there and some of her art. And yeah.
Mixed in with all those other weird billboards. There it is.
Have you ever seen a wall drug billboard?
A wall drug billboard?
Yeah.
No. Do tell.
Okay. You just need to keep your eye out because they're everywhere.
Okay.
And it's Wall Drug, South Dakota. And they have billboards everywhere. I think they have one in like Nepal. I mean, seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going
Free
on
ice
the road
water.
ASAP.
Anyway, we digress.
That might happen a lot today.
Annie, I want you to take a moment and tell our listeners what you do and what mediums you work with.
Sure. Currently, I'm a painter. I work in oil, but I explore a lot of mediums. I work in Encaustic, and for those people who don't know what that is, it's a mixture of wax and resin, and it's heated on a pallet up to about 200 degrees. You don't want to overheat it because it becomes toxic, but you paint with it as a hot material. So the drying time is very immediate, and you get very discrete points in the painting by doing that. And I started doing that about 5 years ago, mostly painting Native American subject matter just out of interest and a desire to study sort of a certain aesthetic. And I now work in both oils and encaustic, but I also work with digital art. So I'm sort of experimental with all of those different mediums. And I sometimes think about my studio as being sort of a lab where I can just try all these different mediums together, sometimes breaking rules, sometimes not, but exploring these in different ways and seeing what I come up with.
Yeah, and I was seeing like Jasper Johns, he used encaustic a lot just because he didn't want to wait for paint to dry.
That's right. He'd paint his flags, and he wanted to paint those. I was just watching a great movie called The Painter's Painter. Something like that. It's so fascinating, but he was talking about that, and I felt like he's my brother now. I just thought, I get it. I understand why he used that, and I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, and that's a great documentary. Oh my God, they talked to a lot of the masters of that time, you know, the expressionists and coming out of the expressionist movement, I guess you could say. But that's a great series. It's
a great series.
You're a full-time artist, but it's taking you a while to get to this point. You grew up in Northern California, correct?
I did. Yes. I was born in Denver. My father was doing a residency here in medicine. And then before we moved to California, we did a stint where the family moved down to Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and lived on a reservation for a year. He was doing some work there. And I was about 2.5. And that's really when memory of life started for me, really visual memory of my childhood. And then we moved to Northern California, to Palo Alto. Couldn't be further away from Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. But that's where we landed, and I grew up there in a pretty cool era for the Bay Area. I mean, I think it's changed a lot, but it was a pretty darn cool town to grow up in. A lot of creativity, a lot of intelligence, a lot of curiosity going on in that era. Great music, obviously. So that's where I was raised. Yes.
And you mentioned to me when I did a studio visit with you about a month ago, and then I read that you were diagnosed pretty early in your childhood with dyslexia. Is that correct?
I sure was. I was held back in second grade. It was pretty traumatic as a child in those days, because it wasn't heralded as what a cool thing to be dyslexic. Aren't you special? Remember my mom reading me lists of famous people who had dyslexia to try to help me kind of swallow that. But, you know, I sometimes joke with people that my early entree into art was doing ink blot tests with psychiatrists. Because I feel like I did them all the time. And I remember thinking, well, this is fun, you know. But yes, I was diagnosed in around second grade, and I was really dyslexic. I mean, I really struggled to read and to do math. But I had, as a child, I was sort of aware of that cool thing about dyslexia. And that's that dyslexics often sort of read things in 360. They sort of become more attuned to the nuances of what are going on around them. And I was very attuned to that sort of thing. It's a very kind of out there, goofy, sort of spiritual child. And I think that dyslexia was really hard, but I made up for it in other ways. I made up for it probably creatively and athletically.
Yeah.
And I had an awesome mother, by the way, who just, you know, was my cheerleader all the way. So I was very fortunate, and father.
Yeah, it sounded like your mom was really a guiding light, and she really encouraged you and helped you kind of negotiate these waters. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom was amazing to all of our kids. She really worked with all of them individually and was really good at like figuring out what each child sort of needed. I probably needed more in some ways than the other kids, especially academically. but I was a pretty gifted athlete, which was really lucky. So she just signed me up for everything. And then I was the youngest, and my mom grew up in Iowa and was now in Palo Alto. And I think she really sort of pushed me to be on the forefront of the social side of things. So I was always kind of pushed into being, the head of the newspaper in junior high school, or the captain of the team in soccer, or I would referee softball games. So I was out there doing a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, I had these moments that were just devastating, like being held back in second grade. They also held me back from becoming a Girl Scout from brownies. I mean, these were, in second grade, these were major things for me. But I had sort of this weird mix. And the other thing is that my mother really gave me this freedom to be super free as an individual. As an example, and this sort of ties into painting more recently, in second grade, I showed up to school in lederhosen and wooden clogs for pretty much an entire year. And my mom finally said, you can't wear those clogs to church anymore because they're too loud. It was one of those, churches with concrete floors. And so my mom let me wear all this eccentric stuff and put on plays in the backyard and do all this cool stuff. So, on the one hand, it was difficult, but she gave me this beautiful freedom to explore life. And then I had friends who were kind of living similar lives. So it was pretty cool.
That is cool. So were you always like very observational as a child?
Yes, very. For a kid who couldn't read very well, my mom would say I would say things that were really super profound, that were difficult for her to answer sometimes. But I was very observational, and I loved hanging out with adults as a child. And I loved observing their conversations and listening to what they had to say. And later in life, I think I've come to realize that I was visually able to see sort of what was going on and scan a room and kind of understand things without understanding them, right? I mean, I sort of could see many aspects of something without really fully able to digest it until I became older.
Yeah. And I was an only child. So I had that kind of same experience. And a lot of times, when my parents would go visit friends, there may not be other kids, or I was older and the kids were really little. So I would just kind of hang out with the adults and listen to the conversations and the stories. So I totally get that.
Yeah. It was kind of a fun way to be.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to be an only child sometimes too. I was the youngest of four. So
well, it's cool that your mom had that insight and enabled you to be the person, that come into your own as a person and allow you to be free. Were you creative as a child outside of the play?
I was creative in my thought. I was crafty in my actions. So I was always running down to this little hobby shop, and but I loved miniature things. So my friend Andrew Durham, who afterwards became a film producer and now is a fashion photographer, the two of us would collect these miniature food products. And this is why I love Amy Sedaris so much, but like miniature food things and miniature bears and things. But I remember going to the hobby shop, and at some point when I was maybe 7, I decorated all these matchboxes with little wooden people and Christmas scenes. And then that was my first company. So my mom said, go out and sell these around the block. These were the days it was safe to do that. And I'd go door to door and I'd sell these things. So that was my first company. So I was not only creative and crafty, but I was pretty entrepreneurial and pretty unafraid. Yeah. So it was fun. Yeah. I definitely, I don't think of myself as being creative then as much as what creativity means to me now, but I was constantly creating. So I guess, yes, I was.
It was kind of giving you that foundation at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Constantly making. I mean, the Bay Area in those days was such an interesting time, and it was, the 70s and 80s. And in our home, there were strings in the backyard all summer long of dried apricots and beef jerky. And my brother was making madeleines. And, somebody was in the kitchen, this tiny kitchen we had cooking. So it wasn't just me. It was just sort of a lifestyle that I lived in. My dad was a surgeon, but he was home making leather sandals with peace signs on them. I mean, it was just groovy, all of it, it was kind of chaotic, and we interrupted each other a lot, which I might still have a bad habit of doing. But there was just a lot of activity, and we watched TV. My dad set some rule that we could watch. Each kid could watch 30 minutes a week of television, but he never followed up on whether the rules were being adhered to. So we'd all mooch on each other's TV time, so we'd get the maximum number of all the great shows in the 70s and 80s. So it was a fun and crazy house with lots of animals and kittens being born and puppies and whatnot. We had it all.
Sounds awesome.
It's pretty free.
What was your favorite 70s TV show?
I really loved the Brady Bunch, but I have to say Hogan's Heroes. My brother and I watched that all the time, and it's so funny. And I was watching it the other day, and I was thinking, for a little girl to grasp how funny that was, I think it was pretty cool. I think I give my brother credit for that. He probably got me into it.
Yeah, that's a great show. Lots of just funny as all get out. Yeah, I love that show.
So funny.
I have great memories of watching that show at my grandparents' house and in syndication. All those old shows, right? Like,
so good.
Brady Bunch, like you said, Hogan's Heroes, Little Rascals. That was always a one that I always enjoyed.
I watched that one too.
Yep, the golden age of television. I almost feel like right? the 1970s.
Right, Dinners and Petticoat Junction.
I just saw that it's probably last year sometime. I just happened to see it on one of these channels, and I was like, I think I'll watch a round of it, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know she was on this show. It was, but anyway, it was just funny to watch because it was just a hoot and really old fashioned. And, the humor was interesting, different than today. So. Oh
yeah. Yeah. It was a silly time.
I think that was on for 7 years. Sorry.
Yeah. I think it was for a long time.
Yeah.
You graduate high school and you end up going to UC Berkeley and getting a degree in history and a minor in art history. How was that experience?
By the time I got to college, so my parents allowed me to go to a boarding school for a couple of years back east. And this was by choice because of my learning disability. And I was at Palo Alto High School. And by then it was already pretty high pressured. There's, a town where education is big, and there's a lot of pressure to get great grades and get in a great college. And there was a great program for kids with Down syndrome and severe disabilities. And then there was a great program for the straight A students. And if you were somewhere in the middle and you had a learning disability, it was a challenge. And I was sort of aware of that. I really loved learning, but I wanted to be in a smaller environment. So my parents allowed me to go to a school back east called Northfield Mount Hermon. And I attribute that to my getting into Berkeley as someone with dyslexia, along with a lot of hard work. But by the time I got to Berkeley, I was pretty burnt out. My parents were also going through a divorce. And so college years were challenging. But Berkeley, it's such a cool and exciting place. I don't know if you guys have ever spent any time on that campus, and its history is so cool. But I sort of enjoyed college. I didn't just love college. But interestingly, at the time, I would walk by a building that houses an anthropological museum all the time. And I look back on that, I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't go into anthropology or archaeology, because that was always really, even when I was a little girl, an interest. I assumed I would have had to do as much reading, but the fact that I chose history as a major and had to read as much as I did was really hard. It was really, really hard. But I found professors that I loved, and I got through it. I graduated. So I'm not sure I'd get in today. But even back then, it was sort of a feat to get in there with the disability that I had. So I look back on that now and I'm kind of like, wow, I guess I did work really hard. But Berkeley was fun. I made a lot of great friends that I still have today. And it was an interesting time.
So you were in Berkeley in the 80s then, like mid to late 80s or?
Yeah, I graduated in 89. I actually took a semester off. So one summer between my junior and senior year, Oracle Corporation was doing a lot of hiring from Stanford and Berkeley. They called it Oracle University. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I don't even remember thinking about what I was going to do. Never. And so my sister, who's 8 years older, was working for Oracle. She said, you should apply for a summer job. And I did, and I got it. And my job was a director of mail. So literally they handed me a box of mail and I was supposed to go through the mail. And in those days, it was just postcards that they would mail out to see if anybody had interest in Oracle. It was bizarre, but that was my job. And after the summer, they invited me to stay and wanted me to just hire me. And they had it was a good salary, So I said I'd stay for the semester. And I did. And much to my father's dismay, because I think he was afraid I was never going to graduate. But I finished that semester. And then I wrote my thesis the following spring. And then I went right into Oracle from school. So that's kind of how it happened. I think I graduated in 89 and I was already working there. So yeah, bizarre. And then the earthquake hit that spring.
Oh, that's right.
Weird. Yeah. I was living with some girlfriends in San Francisco and I was writing my thesis on the back of a 1906 building. But it was like a square box that they built to the back. And I literally looked down the peninsula and I could see it coming. I could see the earth coming up in waves towards the building. It was surreal. So anyway, that kind of demarks the year for me in terms of my memory of it.
Yeah, I remember that. That was devastating. That was a devastating earthquake.
It was much more, the news made it much more devastating than it actually turned out to be, because they said the whole bridge collapsed. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
But it was devastating. But a lot of good changes also came from it. Sure. So the city was sort of developed.
Yeah, I remember them finding somebody still alive under the collapsed bridge. Like his car was crushed, but he was still inside. Alive.
That was just so sad. That was over on the Oakland side. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
Maybe I digressed on your question. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
We're going way back in time here.
So I have a silly question that we're going to digress on. Do you remember what your thesis was on?
Yes, I do. My thesis was on so I studied ancient Japanese history of all things. And my thesis was on why the Japanese government didn't pull out of World War II when they could have. And I got an A- on it. And I was really proud of that. But it was my whole thesis was that they were really, because of their ancient ways of thinking and their sort of art of war and their warrior-like way of thinking, as a culture, they were sort of stuck in groupthink. And as a result of that, nobody really would step forward and say, we need to pull out after the first bomb. We have to stop this. And so, yes, I remember writing it and I remember it. I wish I could find it. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it'd be fun to read it now, huh?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to be a history major? Were you always interested in history?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't remember being really, driven by history. But when I was little, I was always really interested in Native American culture and the idea of being a pioneer and what it would have been like to be a pioneer. But then I was really interested in archaeology and anthropology. Archaeology probably more as a concept than anthropology, which I understand more today in terms of the different directions you could go with that, right? But I remember my mom researching summer camps where I could go on digs and dig up stuff and be a kind of a camp digger. I don't know what you call them, but anyway, that's what I was sort of a funny, scrappy kid. I like to hunt for things. I like to hunt for geodes, and I like to even get on the ground in the grocery store and try to find change. I mean, I was always looking for stuff. Even we'd go to the beach and I was just a beachcomber. So I think, I mean, I look back on that and it's funny, but I think that was this ties into my art so much that I'm always looking for that discovery of that thing in a weird way that reveals who I am. And it's hard to explain that, but somehow it's a relationship that I have with past humans or other humans that help me mirror who I am to them and them vice versa. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
So my interest in history, I mean, I'm trying to think back to when I was little, how I looked at it to now with more, I hope, a little more wisdom and awareness. But I was always searching for that. Always. And really looking for the goodness in people and the likeness in people and the empathy in people. That was just a tenet of who I was forever. Yeah.
And you very much can see that in the work that you do, I think.
I hope so. I don't know. I mean, I think so. It's part of what I'm trying to achieve. And yet when I make work, a lot of times I really want other people to see it how they see it. It's up to their interpretation. If I were to say, what do I hope people see in my work? I hope they see the empathy in it and the desire to, I hope they see, I don't want to say I hope they see me in it. I hope I'm seen through my work, but I hope that they see the connection that we have. So I really believe that my work or any other work becomes true art when it's made and then the viewer sees it. And there's a moment where there's a communion of that and it becomes important. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just want to make sure I don't sound crazy. Though I might be.
No, not at all. So you have this interest in history, you incorporate in your art, but before you get to that point where you're actually a full-time artist, you have this job with this big corporation, Oracle.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. What?
Oh my.
Why does that make you go, oh my gosh?
Well, it was such a fun time. I met my ex-husband there, and there were all these young people, and we had a really good time. It was super fun. And I'm still good friends with many of the folk from that time. And they've all gone on, most of them, to be people in tech or wine industry owners or do music. Some are musicians, different things. It was a fun time, but I remember not being aware that I was trying to get out of the building all the time. I mean, I was rushing out to get a coffee all the time. And there was something about being in a corporate life that I wasn't very aware of myself when I was younger. Like I listened to Michael Dowling talk the other day and I was thinking, God, he so knew himself, but I really didn't. And I didn't know what my purpose was or what I wanted to do. I wasn't very clear, but I didn't want to be in a building like that. And the other thing I was not good at was politics. I just didn't understand how to play the political game inside of the corporate world. I was really bad at that. I'm kind of a overly honest person, and so that doesn't always bode well. I don't hold my cards to my breast very well. So yeah, I wasn't good at that. But what I was able to tap into in those days was sort of some leadership skills that I naturally had, and then an entrepreneurial desire to go out and do my own thing. So by the time I had my kids, I have 2 children, Grace and George, I went out on my own and took on a consulting role. A client hired me away, and it allowed me to work from home and then be a mom. And it was perfect segue for that. But what happened that was the big change for me into moving into the arts was that I love that it started with jury duty, but it did. I took a jury duty job. Everybody said, oh, you shouldn't have to do that. You have young kids, you got a job. And I thought, I want to do jury duty. And that was probably the anthropologist in me, but I was dying to go see what that was about. So I did. And unfortunately, it was a stupid and boring car accident case of some kind in Oakland, California. But I met somebody I made it to the jury, by the way, which was exciting. And I met a guy by the name of Charlie Lamb, who was the IT director for Francis Coppola's winery, Niebom Coppola Winery up in Rutherford. And he heard what I did. And this was in, oh gosh, when was this? This must have been in like 1999 or 2000, something like that. And he came up to me and he said, I work for Francis Coppola and he wants to build this e-commerce site for his winery. And he said, would you be interested in writing a business plan to build that? And I said, well, in all honesty, I could, but I don't know anything about e-commerce, but nobody does. So if you pay for me to go to New York to some convention where I can learn, I knew about some convention going on where I can, learn this, then sure, I'll do it. So long story short, they hired me to do this and we went to New York. And I remember the keynote speaker was from 1-800-Flowers. And they were really the only company doing e-com. They were the only one at the time. And there were 100 people at this event. I know I probably digress on this in a way, but what happened was when they hired me on this contract is I was driving from Berkeley to Napa on a daily basis, and these drives turned something on in me. And the beauty of the landscape there started to wake something up. And then working inside of this very creative culture that with many, many different arms. I mean, Francis was known for his films, but he was also an amazing winemaker and he was a chef. And he had a magazine called American Zoetrope magazine at the time that was sort of scouring for good stories that could potentially become films. All these neat, eclectic things were going on. And something turned on. And it was really profound for me. And that is when I ended up segueing out of sort of that line of business when that contract was over and getting into the arts.
So was that kind of a gradual thing, taking those trips to Napa Valley, or did it just kind of hit you over the head one day and you were like, all right, this is what I got to do?
So they hired me. I pitched a business plan for building the e-commerce site. So it was really the marketing and the business aspects of the site. And Charlie built the site. So he lived in Berkeley as well, and we worked together. But when they hired me, they gave me an office in a little house in Napa on the railroad tracks that I would commute to every day, which was about an hour and a half each way. So I had to show up 5 days a week, and it was a long drive. But I always say, like, sometimes our big changes in life literally happen with something physical that happens. And that physical drive switched up everything for me. Somehow I clicked into sort of knowing who I was and that I needed to be in a creative realm. And that's where it all started. I mean, I distinctly remember one drive in particular and thinking, I need to be making things.
Driving is really meditative, I think. And so having that time in the car each day and then being in a beautiful environment, I guess I could totally relate to that and see how you would come to that epiphany. So what did you start doing that was creative? How did you pivot from there?
Yeah, well, I'm actually one of those people that really believes that when you kind of put something out to the universe sort of responds. So interestingly, I was teaching some kickboxing, such a weird story, but a friend of mine who was studying at California College of Arts and Crafts back then, now it's California College of Arts. They changed it. She was a Judaic metal artist, and she was making beautiful forged silver chalices and talismans and beautiful things. She cut her hand and she couldn't go to the studio. So one day she said, "Do you want to come in and I'll teach you how to make a ring?" And when I was a little girl, I was heavily accessorized at all times. So along with, the wooden clogs and the lederhosen, there were always a lot of necklaces and Native American rings and whatnot going on. So anyway, I'd always loved that. And so I said, yes, let's go in. So we went in one day and we made a ring. And it was the coolest thing to just make something like that. And that I was so inspired by her that she just knew how to do that. She knew how to use all these materials and she knew her way around the studio. And I'd really never spent time in an artist studio, let alone an art campus like that. And so we made this ring and then bought me this huge block of crystalline wax, which is it's a brown wax and it's used for large sculpture for lost wax casting, but it's got a really low melting point. So it's not ideal for some things. But I took it home and I thought, I'm going to sculpt a bunch of little boats. And this is sort of the beginning of my self-taught everything. But I started making these little boats. But the problem with this wax is the longer you touch it, the more it starts to melt, right? See, it's not really a carving wax. It's kind of a sculpting wax. So I would put it in the freezer and then I'd take it out and then I'd sand it and then I'd put it in the freezer and then I'd carve it. And so a week later, I kind of got obsessive over this, which I can do sometimes. And I showed up at her studio again with these 6 little boats that I'd made. And she was sort of blown away because she's like, "That's not what you're supposed to use it for. That's crazy. How did you do that?" And I said, I don't know. You didn't tell me what I was supposed to use it for. So I made these boats. And I think she took it to the dean of the school and he said, "Why isn't she enrolled here?" And, it wasn't really something I thought about doing as a mom at the time. So I said, well, let's turn these into rings. Let's make these funky, weird rings with little boats on them. And so we cast them all. And lo and behold, I had these 6 rings. I'm actually wearing one now because I was showing somebody, it's a long story, one today, and I haven't worn one in a long time. But so we made these little boat rings. And then I just decided I'm going to start making jewelry. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make jewelry. And I got into a show within about 6 months in San Francisco because I had kind of a marketing background and I had nothing to lose. I didn't have a lot of fear. And I started this jewelry line and I did that for the next 15 years. And I sold to stores worldwide. I ended up having a store in Palo Alto, flash forwarding, a few years later, and had some success with that. But it really just pushed me into the art world in general. And at the time, also, I started painting. So I started painting in acrylic at the same time.
So that was kind of the jumping off point and your experimentation and with different mediums. So have you always been self-directed? Because it sounds like you were.
Yes. When I was diagnosed with dyslexia, there wasn't really a place for me. It's not today where you have all these people move in around you and give you support. I remember holding my mom's hand in 2nd grade and talking to the principal of our school, Dr. Tankersley. And I remember him saying, well, she's never really going to amount to much as a student. And I was standing right there. And, yet again, I was a pretty observant little kid. And I remember thinking, and I was also a tomboy. I imagine myself in my lederhosen, but crossing my arms and thinking, well, I'll prove him wrong. And there was a kind of a jumping off point for me there where I thought, I'm just going to have to do this myself. I never really was comfortable in anything but a very small learning environment, but it became more natural for me to just try things through experimentation. And I became sort of bugged by the fact that there were so many rules around how you were supposed to learn. So I'm not a defiant person. I never wanted to break rules to break rules. I just wanted to question why they have to be there. And that kind of ties back into when I took a math class at Berkeley. I had so much anxiety over even passing this class. So I took a self-paced class, and I always got the answers right, but I always did it mathematically wrong. And so I just thought I'm more comfortable figuring it out on my own. And so I always have done it that way. Joyfully, not with, not with a lot of sadness. It's just sort of turned out that way for me.
That's a great story. And I can't imagine being that young and hearing that from an adult. I mean, that could have gone totally sideways for you. You could have said, that could have really hurt you for the rest of your life. But instead you had, at that young age, the foresight to go, well, I'm not going to let what this guy's saying about me or saying to me, define who I am. Like, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to make it happen, even at a young age.
Yeah, I think I was lucky to have enough confidence as a child. I was kind of a dreamy child and out there, but I had some confidence. And I had a mother who, yet again, was really there to place me and put me into things that helped me excel. I was a child gymnast and a ski racer and a soccer player. They were planning on sending me to an Olympic training camp for gymnastics, and then I hurt my back, and then I was a ski racer. But I got a lot out of healthy competition. So I had some confidence to go on. And my mom's line always was perfection's overrated. And when I teach art today, I tell people that it's like, let yourself off the hook. The best art, the best thing you can shine through in your art is your unique imperfection. That's the thing people most gravitate to in art, I believe. It's not your perfection in it, it's your imperfection in it. And so I had a mom who really allowed that for me. And I'm really couldn't be more grateful for that.
I love that insight. And I believe that as well, that it's not the perfections that make something beautiful, like you were saying, it's the imperfections, right? Whether we're talking about, a beautiful person or a piece of art, it's those imperfections that make us unique and different and beautiful.
Absolutely. I think it's where people pause the most when they see art. I mean, there are plenty of artists that I love that are hyper-realist painters, and there's perfection in that. But generally, if they're doing figurative work, they're capturing the imperfections of the study. So that's what resonates for me, certainly.
Yeah. So you have this jewelry business, you're designing, making jewelry, and then you start painting. What kind of things were you painting early on?
Abstract stuff. I got divorced when I was 35. So it was a time of change and turmoil. And I was painting abstract work, but sort of storytelling, somewhat about, how do I explain it? There's a painting that I have that had 3 large lanterns with a table and a cake with candles burning out. And it was sort of a story of what was happening. So I guess I was storytelling, but some abstract work, I was just sort of dabbling at that time. I didn't do a lot of work, but I was pretty busy with the jewelry pretty fast.
And so did you enjoy doing having your own business and designing and creating this jewelry?
I enjoyed some of it until it got to be too much. And part of it was that my life was, I wrote somewhere that these were not my best 10 years. And that's okay. It was a tough time for me when I was running this business. My mom had been diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, and when I divorced, my children and I moved back in with her in Palo Alto. And my kids were going through the divorce, and that was difficult and painful. And I was trying to run a store. And when I look back on what I did love about the jewelry design was the waxwork. There was something very relaxing to me and very holistic about working with that medium. And as a child, I did boutique, and I just always loved that. And so that part was comfortable. The part that wasn't was the everything else. So, there was a lot of having to get press. I mean, while it was an art, it was also sort of in the fashion world. So it required a lot of me to be on all the time. And then there were the parts, the jewelry parts. Oh my gosh, that just drove me nuts. You had to manage all these itty bitty parts. And then there was a store, and then there was managing a store. And I somehow thought I was Superwoman and I could do it. And I wasn't. And then 2008 hit, and it sort of just stopped overnight. And so that was really a reckoning for me, really difficult. So did I enjoyed some of it, but I did not enjoy all of it. Not the way I enjoy painting now. I mean, it was a step towards my calling, but I did finally reach it through painting.
So it sounded like you enjoyed the creative aspect of it, but with everything else that was going on in your life, between the divorce and your mom suffering from dementia and then trying to just run the business side of things, it was just a lot.
Yeah, and be a mom, and be a mom that's really hands-on. Yeah, it's just more than anybody could do. It just was too much. So that was a tricky time.
Was it hard to decide to walk away from that?
Really hard. They always say in business, know what your exit strategy is. And I had not one clue. I had never thought about it. And there were still people who wanted it and who looked for it and who, and I had to say, I'm not making it anymore. And they didn't understand why. And, having to explain all that. Yeah, it was hard to walk away from it because I didn't know what else I was going to do. And by now, getting back into tech was kind of not really a choice to get back in. It wasn't, I was out of it for too long. So that falling back into that was challenging. I ended up going into some technical recruiting, which is something that I could do. And I did that up until and through I moved back to Denver, which was a good move. I was raising kids in Palo Alto and trying to be in the arts and run a business and then have that sort of come to an end. Palo Alto became more and more difficult to sustain. So I moved to Denver and everything sort of shifted from there. It was a good move. It's a good move.
Another one of those universe things?
Yes, absolutely. There were people who showed up right before I moved on the Palo Alto side. And then the minute I moved in here, I moved into a condo near Washington Park. And I came outside my first morning and I looked over the kind of low wall to the next condo. And there was a woman standing there and I introduced myself and she's my best friend here in Denver. It was like she was just waiting for me. So it's gone really nicely since then. It was a good decision.
What year did you move to Denver?
So it's 8 years in August. So what is that? 13, 14, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Right when it started to really grow. I mean, really change here. And I stayed in recruiting for a while and then started painting. And that was maybe 4 years ago. And then my life really took off. I met my boyfriend here the first year I moved, which was great. And then I also taught yoga. So I met people through that. But my real life happened when I started painting because I'm surrounded by this incredible group of artists. And there's such a strong art scene here in Denver. It's just, people are accountable. They work hard. It's just come together really nicely. And my boyfriend makes all my frames. So that's been a really nice way for us to work together. I'm really lucky.
That's awesome. So what was the catalyst or jumping off spot or point for you to just take this on full time and not do anything outside of that? Walk away from the recruiting thing and then just focus on your art?
Yeah. The recruiting company was a small company and we had a lot of success and I did really well with that. But then there were some shifts. Some of its contracts went away and there were some changes happening in the real estate sector, which is the sector that we worked in. And about a year prior to that, I was up in Aspen with two girlfriends from the Bay Area, and we were in a gallery, and I was talking to the gallery owner, and I was explaining what I used to do. And he said, is there any way you could get back to it? And he said it in a way that was like, it was another universal thing. It was like, wow, maybe that is where I'm supposed to be, but I was having a hard time dreaming of it. And so I had conceptualized a few things, and I came home from that weekend, and I'd always wanted to try encaustic painting because I missed that wax work that I talked about. And I was home alone, and we have this stove with a big griddle on it. So I used that. Probably not the most toxic. Do not use encaustics on your stove at home. But I did. So I did some little tiny paintings, and something turned on again. It was like when I left my jewelry business, my heart was broken. I mean, I was like really hurting, and I almost couldn't look at it anymore. So I started painting, and then my boyfriend came home that weekend, and he went, "I didn't know you could paint." And I said, well, I kind of didn't know I could do this either, but I guess I can. So then, true to my somewhat obsessive self, and I've been called a somewhat obsessive painter, I really dove into it. And we have this nice space that I could work in. And I ended up purchasing an encaustic palette and started doing that encaustic work. So that when the gig with the recruiting came to an end, I was fortunate enough to be able to sort of just go into painting. So initially it was really sort of painting as a hobby because I didn't have really a business. I didn't have a network. I didn't have, a way to show my work. But I pretty quickly and aggressively got myself into some shows. And then I met Michael Dowling and asked him to mentor me. And he was painting with a number of people at his studio. And so I started painting with those guys. And then it sort of took off from there. Started doing more shows and have had pretty good success with selling my work. So, I attribute to that to making a lot of work, working hard, and then having a marketing background and an entrepreneurial spirit and drive to seek out ways to sell art. It just sort of gelled. It just sort of made sense and was fun. I mean, I remember when I first met Michael, he said, well, are you having fun? And I loved that question. And I said, yes, I am. And I check in with that all the time. I mean, some days aren't as fun as others, but in general.
Just part of the ride, right?
Yes. It's, people don't recognize that people who run art businesses work really hard to make those businesses operate just like any other business. So you can't just make art. You have to do a lot of other things. So,
yeah. Or surround yourself with a team that can do it, but who can afford that, right?
Well, but we have a team. We have a team of artists who are all really, as Brett Fox said in he said, at the building we work in, people are accountable. I mean, we show up. And paint and then might have some tequila, but we also work really hard and push each other and scheme up ideas for shows. And so in a weird way, there is sort of a support network that helps push that forward and me forward for sure. I'm really appreciative of that.
And it sounds like you tapped into that pretty quickly. And you said that you aggressively searched out places where you could show your work. So how did you go about that and where?
Yeah. So I don't remember who turned me on to it. Oh, you know what? Michael and Jen Starling turned me on to Zapplication and Cafe, which are the two sites that list all the shows nationwide that you can attend, and you apply to shows through those. So I applied to a number of them and got into them. Unfortunately, I really don't like doing those shows. I don't like the part of it is that I have encaustic work, and going to a hot summer show with work that has encaustic on it is very difficult. And the physicality of it and the heat and all that, it's not my favorite way of doing things. So if we were to jump to COVID year, interestingly, as a result of 90% of those shows being canceled, Michael and I conceived of some shows that we decided we'd produce ourselves. And they've had a ton of success. And what I love about it the most is that I can be in service to other artists. So I can produce shows and bring along all these other artists and help promote them as well. And that sort of kills two birds with one stone in terms of my value set, because this would be no fun if I was working in an isolated box. It's fun because my friends are all selling art and my friends are all making art and my friends are hanging out, creating this organized, disorganized group of people sharing our experiences. And that is what this is so much about.
I know you're a practitioner of yoga, and obviously in talking with you in this conversation already, I get the sense that you're a very spiritual person. How does that play into your work?
Well, it has played into my work a lot. So I really believe that how we make shifts in our life, whether they be monumental moves from one city to another, or moving in and out of relationships, or moving through a body of artwork that we have to produce or want to produce, that the physicality of moving really puts that in motion. I mean, that seems really obvious, but it's easy to sit around in a chair and think up all kinds of ideas of things you want to do and paintings you want to paint. But you have to actually get up and move to get all of those senses kind of working. And so yoga has sort of embodied that for me. And then I became a yoga teacher, and I teach Bikram yoga, although in the last year I really haven't, and I haven't practiced much because of COVID. But the experience of Bikram yoga sort of mirrors, or can mirror if you want to, how you move through and push through challenges in life. If you can do it physically, then you can do it mentally and emotionally, or at least it's easier to do it that way. It's easier to do it. And so I think that even for artists, get up and get some exercise every day, get up and go for a walk, get things moving, because inevitably it gets everything else going, your brain going, your psyche going. It starts to get you energized and enlightened towards, what it is you want to make or how you want to make it. So there's a strong tie for me between those things.
I love how you just explained that. Yeah. It goes back to, like the physics principle, right? An object in motion stays in motion.
Yes.
Plays on that.
Yeah. But in yoga, the other side of the coin is when it's time to not practice, when it's time to pull back in your practice, when it's time to sit with that feeling of nothingness that you can have, or those moments where you're not inspired to do a painting, that's okay too. So it's just staying present, but it's also understanding that there are times where you need to regenerate so that you can go back into the studio and make more. I'm a person who tends to stay in motion more than not, but I do know that when I need to have a slower day, that's okay. So today was an example of that. We kind of started this conversation that way. And that's, I showed up at the studio and the whole energy was just sort of slower. And, if people didn't come through the open studio, that was okay. And we all ended up just hanging out and having such a nice time sort of painting, but it was a vibe of being very restorative and not necessarily at work. And that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. When I had the opportunity to visit at the last open studio, you had work spread out all over your studio.
Oh, God.
And it was great because you were like,
was it organized or disorganized?
No, it was organized disorganization. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is what I love about artist studios. I love going into a space and just seeing how they have things set up and how they work and, you know, the whole thought behind it. And you took a moment and you explained the whole encaustic process and showed me where you were, melting the wax and explained how you did it. And then we walked around together and looked at some of the pieces and you talked about them. And it was really refreshing and inspiring at the same time. So do you always have multiple pieces going on at any given time?
Yeah. Yeah. Like many multiples of pieces. I always have a to-do pile. I like to sit on some pieces and part of it is, there's two thoughts that go through my mind when I head in the studio. It's usually, what do I want to make and how do I want to make it? If I don't know what I want to make, then I can go back to pieces that are on my to-do pile and I can consider, how do I want to make this? Because they've already gotten started. So it's kind of a nice way for me to keep those two things in balance. But because I work in so many mediums, they are usually at different stopping points. So if I'm just painting in oil and I'm going to do a lot of layering, then there's drying time. If I'm working in digital work that needs the next step, which is usually an intervention with some oil, I can play around with that and then set that aside. Or I might have another piece where I painted into it with oil and I just don't know where I want to go next. And I decide I want to put encaustic on it. So I tend to start a lot of work and then have a lot kind of waiting in the wings to work on. And I've always worked that way. To my own detriment too. Like I said, when I had a jewelry business, I was frustrated because I had so many parts. And part of that was because I started so many projects at one time. I sort of envy people that are good at starting one thing and finishing it, but it's just never going to be who I am. So I like to keep a lot of balls in the air. And I mean, Michael Dowling has said I'm somewhat of an obsessive painter. So if I'm on a theme, I want to paint a lot of that theme and explore that as much as I can. So yeah, I have a lot of work going on at one time.
I'd like to take a look at a piece and see if I'm going to name it and then we can talk about it. It's Iron White Man.
Oh yeah.
You remember that one?
I do.
So that's a digital piece. And so talk about the process of making this
So generally what I do with the digital work is it really harks back to my interest in history, but I start with late 19th century to mid 20th century photographs and I bring them to pure black and white. And then I use apps on my phone. So all my digital work is super low tech digital. I do everything on my phone. And it's really because I started doing this when we were traveling as a way to create work that I can either work into later or that inspires an oil painting. So I can work off of that as well. But in this case, what I did was I blended the image with a number of images, but the main central part of that is that striped face. And that's coming from an image of a quilt. And I thought a lot about that as a subject matter because I was interested in what was going on during his time, but for a pioneer. So it's kind of a blend of him and kind of the idea of a quilt and the aesthetic on sort of that side of history. And so I blended the two and then painted into that with oil. So that white sort of stripe under his eye is oil paint. And there's a process by which you can lay down a medium and then pull that oil away with a squeegee, which is something that I employ with my oil painting too. And then I kind of painted in his pearls and parts of that. And then it's finished with the encaustic work. You know that he's a Native American man, but there's a new narrative being played out, which sometimes feels like a big responsibility because who am I to change the story? I'm not really changing history, but I'm sort of what I'm trying to do is bring these old images into a more contemporary space so people can look at them again and maybe reconnect or connect in a new way. And so that's what that's about.
So in the Encaustic element of it, is that give it a 3-dimensional look to it? Like if I'm looking at is this printed on like a canvas, started on a canvas, or?
When you work with Encaustic, you have to pretty much work on wood panel, although there's an incredible Encaustic painter out of Canada named Tony Sherman, and he works on canvas with Encaustic, which is cool. And I think what he does is he uses a really kind of watery Encaustic. Somehow he really uses a light brush and application. But in this case, it's on a wood panel. And then I've applied both pigmented Encaustic and clear Encaustic over him. And what happens with the Encaustic is there's an immediacy to its drying time. So I can use a palette knife to smooth it out, or I can let a lot of those drips and drops kind of stay there. And I employ both techniques. I mean, many times when you see Encaustic work, you'll see that it's very glassy. It's like a film over sort of an abstract painting. And that's a beautiful way to approach it. It's just not how I do it. Because I work with figurative work, I like to get those drips and the thickness, because it's sort of like the layers of being human. And I think people do respond to that in terms of the relief that it brings.
So do you get much pushback from the Native American community at all?
I haven't, but when I first started, I was only painting Native American work. And I did a show in Oklahoma, and that's a very large crowd of Native Americans coming through, and only a few people kind of questioned. And the only time they really questioned it was I did sort of an interesting, cheeky painting of Sitting Bull, and some people didn't like that work. But already at that time, I was deciding that I don't want to just paint Native American people anyway, because I want to broaden my expansive to all of humanity. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a registered tribe member, and there has been some pushback, but to be honest with you, I mean, art is art. Any artist can make anything they want. If a Native American wants to paint me, they can, and I don't have an issue with it. So, and it's not out of disrespect. It's just sort of, that's not how art is. Art is open and free. And also the work I do is out of total humble respect for the beauty of their culture, and something that I think we've really robbed our country of and lost out on. So, it's coming from a good place.
And I've read a bunch of articles about, I've kind of gotten into this, whether it's art appropriation, where you're using other people's photography or artwork and then creating your own, or cultural appropriation, which is, using, I guess, like you said, the narrative of another race, and you're incorporating that in a piece of art or literature or whatever. And so it's just kind of interesting to see what people's take is on that. I watched a documentary about Fran Lebowitz, and she made a comment that I thought was really interesting. Her and Toni Morrison were best of friends, or until Toni passed away recently. But Toni, when she wrote people like her, people that she can envision. And they were talking about writing for other people, and specifically about reading other people's or other books and expanding your knowledge. And Fran's whole perspective of it is she likes to read other cultures to broaden her. She doesn't need to see herself in the culture. And where Toni was kind of taken in that, if you remember that piece, she was kind of taking the opposite side, where people want to see themselves in the book. Fran basically was saying, I don't care about that. I want to expand my window. I want to see a window into a different culture. So that's why she reads what she reads. And I thought that was kind of an interesting take in context of, things that I was reading at the time about art and cultural appropriation. And I find it interesting. And then when I seen your work, I just kind of wanted to touch on that. What kind of pushback or what kind of comments do you get? I'm sure you get comments from all types, because your work is gorgeous. And I love the layering of the images, and they do evoke a narrative. And the way you do this, the narrative is really wide open, because you can you can input any kind of narrative in a lot of these.
You can come at anything from any point of view you have. You get that right. but we also get to be as curious as we want to be. And to me, curious is kindness. I mean, curiosity is the opposite of fear. And so I'm being curious about cultures and diving into those out of pure interest in others and the desire to see other people. I mean, like the Dalai Lama says, the biggest gift you can give anybody is to see them. And that's just like I want to be seen as an artist. Like I was just thinking the other day how, I wish that my dream collector would come along and they'd be as courageous about their selection of my work as I am about the work I do. So I have some pieces that are weirder than others, but I wish that those were seen as my best work because I think they are. But in terms of subject matter, am I not allowed to look at another culture and then do art around that? How is that not an allowed thing? I think that's a loving and kind and beautiful experience for me to look at it. Now, obviously, if I, did something inappropriate in it, that's one thing, but that's not where I'm coming from. And so I really never get pushback on that. I think people get it. I hope that they see the humanity in my work. And if they don't, I'm good to stand up for it and say that I'm coming from the right place.
Yeah.
Being in the arts, no matter what you do, whether it's painting people from other cultures or diving into your deepest secrets to paint something, takes a lot of courage. It just does. It's a brave thing to put yourself out there every day and put your paintings out there every day. And this is part and parcel of that for me. So yeah, I really haven't gotten any. In fact, I have Native American friends who are artists who hang out with me and they get it. And I've had the greatest conversations with them about my work. And they've been very appreciative of it. So, and one of my friends who's Native American once said, well, there's always going to be people who are Native American who are angry.
Yeah.
And there are always going to be people who are white who are angry and black there's always going to be some of that.
Yeah.
But I choose to not ignore it, but to hope that my work is experienced the way it's meant to be.
Yeah. I love them. And I these are pieces that you want to spend some time with. You want to really kind of explore the layers that you put in them. I think you got to do it. And just to sit and look at them and pick out all the different elements of it is huge. I'm really excited about these. These are great.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see your work in person because I've only seen it online, obviously. So I'm excited.
Yeah, the Encaustic is a fun kind of touch point for the work, I think.
And because I'm going to ask a follow-up question, Todd, and this is a question I think we even asked Michael Dowling. In your view as an artist, what does it mean to be bold?
That's a good question. What it means for me to be bold is to go in the studio and paint something and not care about whether somebody's going to like it or not. There's a quote that I have that I recently printed out that I keep in my studio, and it's by Warhol, and it says, "Don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone else decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it, while they are deciding, make even more art." And that is absolutely the way I go to work, because I would be miserable if I was trying to win a personality contest doing what I do. I'm so lucky that people do like it. And the weird thing about art too is that as you grow as an artist, people become more understanding of your work through the ages, right? So here's year 1, here's year 10, but people start to understand you and your work differently as you put it out there, and it just takes time. So it's kind of like anything else. You just have to be patient that your audience will come to see you and see your work in the light you hope it's seen in. I mean, you just have to sort of trust in that, but not do the weird stuff. The weird stuff is usually the more eccentric weird stuff, at least for me, is coming from maybe a deeper part of myself that I kind of braving the waters to go into. And it might not be accepted today, but maybe someday it will be, and maybe not. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the business of an artist also is that you have to kind of manage that. So you have to make work that's marketable. You just do if you want to make a living. And I do this for a living. This is my paycheck. And then I get to do this work that just excites me. And that, and because I'm prolific and because I do a number of works at a time, I can do all of that. So.
Great answer.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I don't think anybody has explained it that way on this podcast before, but I love how you put it in context that, this body of work is what really kind of defines where you're at and where you're going. And it really helps you as an artist and as a collector and a viewer of your art to kind of see that.
Yeah. It's hard to put it into words. And that's partly why I like a lot of people paint is because they can't put it into words. But who we are as an artist isn't one point in time. It's not one day. It's not one day in the studio. It's not one painting. It's a progression of all these days and all these experiences that we put into our work and all these rabbit holes we've gone down or experiments we've made that become the culmination of who we are. And there are some artists who are lucky enough to sort of be instantly understood. And then there are many of us who it just takes longer, or it just needs more time for the audience to understand what it is we're doing. And that's all right. It's like everything else in life. We move at different paces and our work is accepted in different ways. I mean, my work has changed a lot since I began. And now I want to do more of that experimental work. And I just hope that people see it and gravitate to it. If they don't, they don't. Or maybe that one person does. And that's, the highlight of the day. I don't know. But that keeps me up at night sometimes because I've done work recently that's been more of the kind of the experimental side. And one of them is super simple. It's in my studio. And it's a drawing of a woman and a rabbit. And they're sort of looking at each other, and it's called The Compliment. And then I put some pieces of masking tape up there, and then I put a medium over that. And it's very simple, and it's black and white. And somebody came in once and said, well, how long did it take you to make that? And my answer is, 50 plus years. It took a long time to make the simplest of pieces. So, I don't know if that is meaningful at all, but
well, I think it is because I'm sure he was asking or she was asking like, hey, how long did it make it,
Right.
an afternoon, but you're coming at it from a view of like, well, it's a culmination of all the years that I've spent on this earth and all the experiences to come up to that at that moment.
To a really, 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 really simple piece.
Yeah.
It's super simple. I couldn't have done this 20 years ago. And that's a nice kind of place to get as an artist where you feel confident about that.
Well, and it's like Mondrian, he didn't come up with those bold color squares. It took him years, and he was he was pulling everything out to get it to its purest form. And is like his piece Jazz, which is really his experience in New York City and the streets and the jazz music. It represents all that, but it took him years to get to that point where he's like, this is the simplest that I can pull this to, but yet still, jazz vibrates just like music does. The piece vibrates because of the use of color and texture and contrast. And I was just reading about him 2 days ago, and it's just interesting.
Yeah.
You're right. It takes 50 some years for me to break this down into its simplest form.
Right. Which is a place of arriving for him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true.
It's an interesting way that I think a lot of people it doesn't compute for them, is that you're not just looking at a painting or you're not purchasing this piece of work. You're actually purchasing or acquiring a piece of the artists themselves. Like you said, that whole life experience, Wes, and everything that's gone into that, your journey as an artist is in that particular piece.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, when I'm thinking about this rabbit piece, it's super, super simple. But when I think of myself as a person, and when I think of my life and how it felt to be a child with dyslexia, everything felt really complicated. I mean, my life's felt, I'm a thinker and I think a lot and I feel a lot. And in general, life has exposed itself to me as sort of a complicated effort. It doesn't feel simple. For some people it does, for me, not. It feels sometimes like too much. And so for me to be able to do a painting where I pare it down to something so simple is a huge place of arrival for me. And I can't explain it more than that, other than the simplicity of it is complex for me, because that's not how I've experienced the world. I see much more detail than that generally. And so I guess that's the first time I've been able to kind of say what that painting has meant to me. And maybe it only will ever mean that to me, but that's kind of the point of it. And again, I don't try to tell people what to think of my art, but.
Are you an empath?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I am. Do you remember that term, indigo child?
Yes. Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, that was a term sort of coined in the 70s. Children who are super empaths, who sort of have a heightened sense of spirituality. That's what I was termed when I was young. And I think that I am and was that. Yeah. Whether it's real or not. But I mean, yes, I am an empath.
I had that feeling. And I think a lot of artists are, especially if you're doing figurative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that this is the kind of work that you do and that you're trying to connect in some way, shape, or form to humanity and the experiences that we have. And it resonates with people, I think. When they look at your work, they feel something. And I think as an artist, if you're able to do that, then you've accomplished something special.
I hope so, because I want other people to know that I see them. And so being able to be empathic in your painting does allow you to see more clearly. I mean, there's a couple things going on with figurative painting. When I paint with Michael, I mean, he sees the figure so clearly that he can just draw one in seconds. And it's always spot on in terms of its balance and all that. And that takes a while to learn that skill set. But I think it helps to be empathic, because I think empaths look more closely and look longer at others. We see others more, and we're maybe more comfortable in that kind of still moment around other people, just looking at someone more carefully. But I always hope that some of my work, that's what people do, is that they linger longer. They kind of look a little bit longer, because we live in this crazy world where things are these short clip videos and everything's in such a rush, and you can just flip through the internet and you pass over sort of the poignancy of humanity and other people and their experience. And so, I hope that my work pushes people to slow down and see more, but maybe not.
There's another piece I'd like to talk about, Todd, and it's called Off to the Catskills. It's on the same page, I believe. I've been popping around back and forth, but it's at the it's towards the bottom. And you see it? It's look like deer dressed as humans, deer face. They're blue. And you can see the wax dripping. That's what I just love that. So can you talk about that piece and like where it came from and what you were thinking of? Did you find it, Todd? Oh, there you go. Yeah. There, that's it.
Yeah, I love this. So it makes me think of a couple things, but the title, I will tell you, came from, I'm a huge fan of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Have you guys watched that?
Yeah, I love that show.
That's funny. Yeah.
Like season 2, episode 7 is the one where Mrs. Maisel goes to the art show with her boyfriend, the doctor, And I watch that all the time. I just love that because it has to do with artists. But in any case, I think I'd just seen an episode where the family goes off to the Catskills, and it's so great. And I thought, what fun for a family to go to summer camp like that. So that's probably where the title came from. But what's interesting about this photograph is I don't know a ton about it, but what I do know is that you're a photographer. When cameras were new and more people got their hands on them, there were these weird setups for photographs in studios. Like I did a painting of a boy with a chicken and he's smoking a cigarette, and it's from a photograph. And so this is this weird photograph, and I wish I knew more about it, but I wanted to bring it to life. And the other thing about it that's cute is my best friend and her family are my best friends, and their daughter live in Seattle, and they sort of look like this. She's an only daughter, and so I always think of them when I did this one. But I just the other element I added to this that I do sometimes is I painted all their faces blue, and there's another piece that I've done with the African American kids where all their shoes are painted blue. And I like to do things that create sort of a commonality between all the characters. So there's sort of this binding. And again, it's kind of talking to the fact that none of us are that different. I mean, we're just not. And so playing with that, and I can't see it that well, but I can see where there is a lot of that sort of thick encaustic wax. And I don't know why that adds such an element to the work, but it really does. And a lot of the green on there is encaustic wax too. So that's where you can mix in a pigment, and it adds sort of this thick cloud above them.
So is that orange dots? Is that more of a,
Yeah, that's a spattered encaustic. So encaustic's really fun. You can throw it and kind of spray it and, throw it at the canvas, or you can let it drip down. I mean, there's a lot of ways to manipulate it. You have to get it super sort of saucy and sort of mixed in with the clear encaustic and really wet to be able to throw it. But that's what I did on that piece.
Yeah, it's really neat. I love that.
Yeah, sometimes it's also kind of speaks to the messiness of life and that, it's just not that tidy.
Right. How big is this? It looks like it's rather small. Is it a small piece?
I think it's 20 by 20.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool piece. I just wanted to talk about that one too.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird one. No shortage of weird.
I love that. I love weird.
Yeah. I mean,
actually, I have this other quote by this guy. He's an art show producer named Ezra Croft. And I post this now and then, but he wrote, people need art in their houses. They don't need Bed Bath and Beyond dentist office art. They need weird stuff. And I love that. And people really respond to it. But in this year of this pandemic, it's been interesting how many more people we've had coming to our open studios and coming in to buy original art because they're spending more time at home. I think other people are even thinking, if I'm going to work from home and have Zoom meetings, I might as well put cool art behind me on my wall. So there's been a shift in art buying this year, even the weird stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody needs a little weirdness in their life. And
yes,
at the very least, it's a good conversation starter at your next cocktail party, right?
Exactly.
I read where you said that you feel that creativity ushers out our truth. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I think my favorite place of being is in a place of like just pure honesty about who I am. Like there's really, I don't ever want to live a life where I have to hide any aspect of who I am. And our creativity is like pure, it's pure truth. And if you can tap into that and get away from being afraid of doing things, it just sort of comes out. The truth of who we are is in there, and creativity is that thing that helps us kind of get there. That's why people use art as therapy. It helps people tap into those vulnerable places in themselves. And if you can let the art speak for you or your creativity speak for you, then you can really start to reveal who you are. And it doesn't have to be in spoken word. And that can feel easier. Sometimes I also think that I paint things and I don't know why I painted them. I don't know the meaning behind it, but I know innately that it has something to do with the truth of who I am. And it all comes back again to maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm the youngest and I didn't feel heard enough, but I want to be seen. I want to be seen, but I want to see other people, and creativity really helps that happen, I think.
It's kind of a way to just kind of free yourself, right?
Yeah. I mean, why not? Why don't we just free ourselves more? I mean, I say that coming from a place of being a person who's pretty darn free. So easy for me to say. But like, man, just everybody let yourself off the hook. Everybody's going to keep loving you this just as much. And I see so many people just pent up and unable to just let go. Just be human, be yourself, be flawed, be broken, be all of the things you are. And there's so much beauty in all of that coming out to me, but it doesn't scare me and it scares other people. So I understand. Doesn't mean I'm right.
I think the danger that we're seeing now is, everybody's got a camera with them. Everybody's being filmed. And now we're starting to judge people for things they've said 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when they were 17. And this whole idea of cancel culture really kind of stifles that whole creativity, or can stifle that whole creativity and putting yourself out there, because not only could you be judged and judged wrongly, but you can have your career totally sidestepped because of something you painted and somebody takes issue with it. And I think we're in a very dangerous time now with this cancel culture. And I was just seeing some pieces about that. And, they showed all these actors and directors and writers and painters, and Picasso was one of them, that they were saying, one person was saying, maybe we don't show them anymore. We'll pull a Picasso out and put somebody else who hasn't had their recognition that Picasso had. And I'm like, it threw me for a loop, because they're the epitome of their time frame for a reason. And just because Picasso was somewhat, he had I think a young girlfriend or something at the time.
Yeah.
And, or Gauguin, who had a wife in French Polynesia, and all of a sudden you can have an exhibit of Gauguin stuff, or now we're going to pull Picasso, or, name any of the other artists. I think that's a dangerous time, because in the fear of, instead of me allowing myself to be honest with myself through my art, I have to pull back and say, ooh, maybe I can't do this because somebody might misconstrue this.
Yeah, that's the saddest loss of freedom I could imagine. I completely will never subscribe to that. I'd rather people pull my art than not make it. I don't know whether, I'm a person who sort of longs for the 70s, because the 70s it was a freaking fun, free time. And especially in Northern California, Grateful Dead went to my high school. And, we were talking earlier, there were streakers at football games. I mean, that stuff was just funny, and it was fun, and it was lighthearted, and there wasn't so much of this heavy weight. And it just feels like, you look at all these kids who are growing up sort of depressed, and no wonder they don't get to go be a full expression of themselves, and they don't get to fully experience creativity that way, because there's fear. And we're going down a really bad path if we just keep limiting ourselves to what is an expression of, or what we see as right expression. I mean, I was born the way I was. I am who I am, just like you guys are. And I don't want to not, aside from believing that I need to be a good person to have values, I'm not going to quell and quiet who I am. Just not, so I'll take my chances.
And good for you. I'm glad you ascribe to that theory of that. I'm going to be myself, Yeah.
No fun not being yourself. It's just not fun. It's fun being yourself. So, and what I find is when you are, people show up and love you, so that's how I'm going to go about it.
It's very refreshing to hear that. But you didn't always feel that way, right?
I think I kind of did always feel that way. Yeah. I went through years sort of teenage angst and insecurities. And I tried different things. And in college, I kind of went through a punk phase. I tried them all, but I went through that stuff. But I think, like I was saying, even when I was little, I don't know. I remember moments where I just thought, yeah, this thing about me not amounting to much, I just thought, what an idiot you are.
Right. Very true.
And it didn't mean it wasn't hard and it wasn't a struggle. And, I hated going to reading classes after school. I had to go to this place like 3 days a week to learn more reading. The only good part was they had this big thing of popcorn, but next to the popcorn was this huge vat of like gross congealed oil that they'd put on it. So that was like, I just remember having to go do that. And that was kind of a bummer that I would always have to spend time at things like that. But no, yeah, I don't know. I always was pretty good at getting back to being true to who I am, because who else am I going to be?
Right.
It's true. I guess where I went with that question, or where I was going with that question, is like when in that corporate environment that you were in, where you felt this really wasn't my thing. I guess you were still being true to yourself, but you had to work through that to realize that, okay, I got to get out of here and move on to this next thing.
Yeah. And it didn't take me too long. It didn't take me too long, thankfully. I wasn't a person who hung in there for 30 years and then said, all these years, guess what?
Thank God, right?
I didn't. And it wasn't even a real decision. It was just like my body just couldn't do it. I couldn't do pantyhose, to put it that way.
I don't think I could either. Thank God I don't have to wear them.
Although I will tell you a funny story. When I was working for Coppola, I had this meeting where I was going to go pitch it to him, and I'd already met him, but I was going to go pitch the business plan. And I won't name names, but I went to one of the higher ups in his organization. I said, well, tell me, can you give me any advice for this meeting? Because it was going to be his whole board and all these men, just like tons and tons of men. And, I was like 29 or something. And he said, yeah, wear a tight skirt. And I remember laughing because my best friends were always boys. So I remember thinking it was funny that he said that. But then I drove home and I'm like, I'm going to wear the fucking tightest skirt I can possibly find, much to my own detriment, because I had to drive now from Berkeley and I could barely get in my car. But I did. I just thought, if that's all you got and I need to wear a tight skirt, because I knew that I wasn't going to get the business for it. I was going to get the business because I'd written a really good business plan. And so I've thought about that in terms of, the whole women's movement. And I always maintained, and this is a total digression, but I've always maintained that the women's lib movement didn't go far enough, because what it asked women to do was start acting like men, like start wearing pants and look like a man. And I was like, well, that's stupid, because we're giving up our big strength of femininity. That's really silly. So I thought, if I need to wear a tight skirt into this meeting, then I'm just going to wear one. So I did, and I got the business.
Maybe I'm going to regret saying this, but maybe that should be a quote. Like, if you want to be successful in life, just wear a tight fucking skirt.
Wear a tight fucking skirt. Right.
That's it. That's the secret of being success in life.
It's so simple. All these, yes, it's so simple. But I literally got to Napa, and it was like probably like 95. And I got out of my car and I was, nervous and sweating bullets. And I had to like shimmy to this meeting. Oh, but I remember getting the business, and it was the first big contract I'd ever gotten. And I was just so proud of myself. So it was cool. Yeah.
That's a great story.
Guts.
Yeah.
I don't wear tight skirts anymore, by the way. So yeah.
You weren't that day that I was at the studio.
No, was I wearing like big army pants or something?
You had like coveralls on. I was like, this is like the perfect uniform. Like, if I imagine like a painter that's really working hard, like this is exactly what she should be wearing.
I should just start wearing really tight skirts as like my whole thing. That's my shtick. I paint in tight skirts. No. I literally wear jumpsuits and big army pants now. You got to be comfortable when you're making art.
Well, yeah. I just thought it was perfect. I think you had to stop. Yeah, because it was cold that day, so you had a stocking cap on. You just look exactly like I would imagine, like professional artists. That's what they should look like. Like you could be the poster artist for what you should look like.
Well, my first studio had the one behind our house. It's great, but it has no heat and it has no air conditioning. And so for the first 3 years, I worked out of that in any weather. So I was wearing caps and cutoff gloves and down jackets and whatever. And then in summer, practically naked, but not quite because it was so hot. And then a couple summers ago, I was out there and a wasp bit my toe. And I just thought, okay, this is it. I can't do wasps. So, but it's a super awesome studio. It's so great. But it was isolated, and it's really nice to work around other artists. Super important.
Yeah, it's a nice setup that you have where you're currently at. And that, what did you call it? The Thatch Building?
We're starting to call it the Thatch Building because Thatch is one of the owners of the building, and he and his wife, Karen, is going to be painting out of there soon. But they own the building, and it's an incredible energy in there. It's just the greatest space. It's an old dairy. It's really cool.
And what's awesome is that, so there's a hole in the floor that has a piece of like clear plexi that goes over it or something. And above you is Michael Dowling. So you can kind of wave to each other as you're working.
Oh my God, we do all the time. We have a show right now going on, and it's called That's What He Said, She Said up in Aspen. And it's really about a dialogue between mentor and mentee, because he sort of mentored me, or has mentored me, my God, so much. Nowadays, we sort of just work side by side a lot. But I was saying to somebody else that it literally is a dialogue. Like the skylight is this communication shaft where we can see each other. And I know when he comes in, and I know his footsteps versus Brett's. But beyond that skylight are his doors. So there's beautiful light that comes down into my little cocoon. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So we paint. Sometimes we'll say, let's both paint this, and we'll go to our separate spaces and paint it and then check each other's work out. Or sometimes we sit down together and do the same painting together just as an exercise.
So talk about, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupt you.
No, that's it. That's okay. I love interrupting. That's what I'm good at.
So talk about that relationship that you have, the mentor-mentee relationship as the mentee. What's that like for you?
Yeah, well, I didn't realize I was seeking out a mentor until I went into Michael's booth at the Cherry Creek Festival one day, and I saw his work, and it was like weird. It was like an instant, will you mentor me? It just came out. And he looked at my work and he said, yeah, I'd like to work with you. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'll come paint with me and some other people. And he was teaching some classes, and then that's really grown. I always have sought out mentors. I think that kind of came from my athletic days of being coached a lot. So I really understand the value of a mentor. I've learned so much from him, both through method and just business. The two of us discuss business stuff a lot, but it's really informed my work in really beautiful ways. And now we sort of inform each other. So some of my digital work can kind of play into the design of his work. If I were here recommending anything to other artists, it's find a mentor, find somebody you can work with. There are other painters that I would love to work with as well. There's a guy named Alex Kanensky on Instagram. I think his handle is Some Paintings, but I just drool over his work. But I would love to reach out to him and say, could I paint with you? Because I had this dream a couple weeks ago where I was physically dissecting one of his paintings. It was so cool. Like I was picking out pieces of the painting and setting them to the side. And in my dream, I was trying to remember, how did I do that? So when I went back into the studio, I could do it again. But he's one of the people that I would like to reach out to and be mentored by as well. So that's how I choose to learn. So it's worked for me. But the mentor-mentee relationship is a wonderful one. on many levels. And we've become just great friends. So it's super fun.
After talking with him and then you just explaining your relationship, it sounds like it's fantastic to have that person that you can bounce stuff off of. And it's very reciprocal. Like, it sounds like he gets as much out of it as you do. So I'm glad you spoke to the importance of that. And I'm glad you asked that question, Wes.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's important to not always work in a bubble, which can happen. You can get in your own head too much. So it really helps having an outside opinion.
Do you have that relationship with any other artists outside of Michael?
Not Brett so much because he's a photographer, but I have a fun relationship with him. And then Forge is in the studio and he's great too. Not really. But I imagine that over time, the right people will walk in at the right time. I think a big part of it is that our physicality is right there. There are other people that I paint with, but no, not really. Not yet.
And it's such a great collective of people, of artists that are housed in that complex that you're in.
It is.
I imagine it's pretty inspirational all the time.
It's fun to go in there. I'm usually the first one in because I'm an earlier person and I don't work late into the night, but I get going early. But I love when the footsteps come in and I know everybody's footsteps. But it's nice to know when the guys have shown up. It's just fun. Yeah, I like it.
And I didn't even think about it. It's you and these three other guys.
3 dudes. I told you I was a tomboy and I always got along with boys.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah. It just works. So.
So you're the first one in typically. Then who comes in? Who's the next one? Because I know all 3 of these guys. Usually
Brett and then Michael and Forge. Yeah. Michael and Forge are super busy producing a lot of shows. So it's not that they're not working. They just haven't, they've probably been to 3 other places by now. And that'll change for me this summer because we're producing 4 shows this summer. And so I'm going to be putting that hat on pretty soon and I won't have as much studio time. So I'm trying to make as much as I can now for the show season. And so that when I am doing shows, I'm not feeling like I'm behind.
So speak to this concept of the whole yard art thing. And that plays into another question of mine of how has the pandemic affected you?
The pandemic has affected me in a lot of really good ways. I sold more art last year than the year before by a lot.
I want to high five you right now because
thank you. Yeah.
I think it's spectacular. And to a T, every single person that we've talked to in the past year have all said the exact same thing, that if it wasn't their best year ever, it was definitely one of their best years for sure.
Yeah. Yay for artists. Artists deserve to have some of that. But I think that the pandemic caused people to rethink their values and what matters, spend more time at home, rethink their homes and rethink what it means to live in space and the importance of surrounding yourself with beauty or inspiration. I think people have had more time and they're spending less on things that they would otherwise spend money on. And so they've decided to think about investing in art and original art. I mean, I was not at my best in the pandemic year. I sat a lot in a big chair and watched a lot of CNN the first half. I will completely, and drank a lot of red wine. I will completely admit to that. It was not pretty. That being said,
because it just stopped you in your tracks or what?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I just kind of went, what? This is so weird and oddly fascinating. So I don't know. I get kind of interested in stuff like that. So I was sort of fascinated for a while by it. And then my habits shifted and I wasn't doing as much yoga and but I was painting a lot. And what happened last summer as this was really setting in and real, and I'd already had COVID. So I had COVID in May and I was pretty sick. I had COVID pneumonia. My boyfriend had to take care of me for about 2 weeks in bed and kind of came out of that. and Michael was over one day and we were standing in the backyard and I said, I was kind of joking around and I said, we should just have a yard sale and let's just call it YARDART. And true to Michael, who's the ultimate optimist, he said, that's not a bad idea. Let's think about that. I said, okay, let's do it. And we made a logo and we picked a weekend and we did it in our yard. We happened to have enough space to host 15 tents. And the artists are so awesome because everyone was accountable. They showed up on time. They put up their tents. And I made some signage. And the first one, I think I posted a lot online. And then we got some nice press in Westward by chance. And then we kind of promoted it. And then I put it on the network neighborhoods. And quite a few people came. And beyond the numbers that came, and mind you, 4 days before the Saturday that we had this, I'd had a hip replacement. So I was I might have been a little bit on painkillers, but my friend showed up and set up my tent and my boyfriend helped set up my tent. And I sort of sat there and sat by the bar and watched people come and go. And people had real wine glasses and they wandered the yard. And what really came out of this, now that we've done 2 of them, is this realization that there was this experience that was like stepping back 100 years into Monet's garden, where people could just kind of come to a salon and experience the artist and hang out with artists the way artists live. So it was different than going to a traditional show. Artists are different when they're at those shows because there's rules and, they can't leave their booth. And the artists could meander and the people could meander and the conversations were great and it was easy. And it was just the coolest thing. And I think quite a bit of art was sold. And then the second one, I know I sold a lot of art at it. And 3 people stepped forward to ask if they could host them in their yards. And these are patrons or clients. So now we have this summer setup where we've got 1 at our place, but 3 others in and around Denver and Boulder. And one couple is going to get all the permits to close their whole street off and make it a block party. They're getting a food truck and a band, an 80s band. I mean, these people are so excited to be part of this kind of movement. And it's awesome. It's awesome because it's just fun and artists are selling their work. So what could be better?
Right.
That is so freaking cool.
It is. And do you
really
think
cool.
I love the concept and I love how you guys figured out a way to pivot and the little bit I know about Michael and his optimism, I could totally see him going, yeah, we should do this. So yeah. Good for you for coming up with this concept and putting it into place and now seeing it take off,
Yeah, we're kind of branding it now. We have one that's going to be more of a salon invitational, just because we think that makes sense for that one. But each one will have its own vibe because the hosts are all different. But it's like the generosity of people that want to step in and make this happen. And one thing we offer is all of the hosts are given a piece of art by each artist. So we really want to, I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it or not. We're kind of deciding whether there's another way to give them credit towards one piece of art if that's what they'd rather have, but they're definitely not overlooked in terms of the gratitude artists have for them hosting. So it's all a big love fest is what it is.
Well, I hope they be able to keep that kind of idea going because I think that's amazing. And to keep that going post COVID and pandemic, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think people in other cities, should pick this up. And we kind of have a core group of artists and then we have a moving group that moves through it too. So it's not always the same, but it kind of gets around. I mean, take COVID aside, it kind of gets around the issue that things were sort of broken and not the galleries aren't amazing and wonderful, but for a lot of people, the experience of going into a gallery, especially for young collectors who don't know how it operates, they don't know pricing, it's intimidating, and it's hard to break that barrier. And also buying art from an artist is an entirely different experience than purchasing an art in another way, because that relationship is so rich. That's what we find people really like is that experience. And even if they don't come and buy at that show, they circle back around. They come to the studio, they get to know you, and then they sort of build the confidence around what it is they're looking at, whether they really want to live with it, whether the price is something they understand, because pricing art is, hard for a lot of people to understand how it gets priced. Yeah. So it's pretty neat. I think the other side of it is the artists are showing how much they love people who love coming to see their work, that we need them too. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah. Again, it's about that human connection. And I
totally.
think, like you said, collectors, and we've heard this time and time again on the podcast, people really desire that. They want to have the dialogue or conversation with the artists and talk about how they feel about the work and how the artist feels about the work. And people love that experience.
Absolutely, they do. Again, I always have, and I said this earlier, I can go make a piece of art, but it really becomes art when the viewer sees it, or when the collector says, I want to have this and live with it and be around it. And then when you have the relationship between the two parties, and you become friends, there's nothing more fun than that for me, certainly. That's why we love our open studios.
And whose idea was that originally?
It might have been mine. I don't want to take credit for where it's not due, but I think when I moved in, Michael and I had plans to teach out of there. And then I said, let's do an open studio in December. And then we said, let's start doing these in winter and into spring every 6 weeks. And then the shows kind of take over. So it's not going to be every 6 weeks all year long, but certainly in that time of year, it fills the void that happens in winter for a lot of people and a lot of artists. So, and we usually have a sale in December out of the studio too. So,
yeah, I love the concept, and I love having that intimate relationship. It was great the day that I came down because I got to talk with each of you individually, and what I told my wife was going to be, I'll probably be there for an hour or whatever. I think turned into like 4 or 5 hours. So
I think you were in Brett's for a couple hours, weren't you?
I was there for a while, maybe not that long, but yeah, we had a good conversation. And then of course, talking with Jason or Forge, every time I see that guy, that's a conversation. So
he's so effervescent. He's got such a good vibe.
He does. And he's always full of these.
Amazing.
I know, right? And he has such great ideas. He's an idea guy. He's always got something cooking. So
absolutely. Yeah. Looks like he's thinking about putting a cafe out front of the building this summer, which is super cool.
That is super cool. Yeah. He was telling me that last weekend when I saw him. So I was like, right on, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be nice when the people are in the park and the jazz concerts are going on and all that. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else you've been doing that's different this year, marketing wise, or anything else that you've put in play because of the pandemic that made you pivot in some way, shape, or form?
No, not really, other than trying to get these YARDARTs kind of put in place early so that I can market them sort of as a group of events all at once, so that we can start to really build the brand of that. Beyond that, no, although I've decided personally to pull out of more of the sort of the bigger shows that I would travel to. I don't personally want to do that. I'd rather kind of make hay here and do my work here. And that's just sort of trying to stay true to myself. I just realized, I said to Michael one day, I'm like, I don't like doing these. And he's like, then don't. So I said, okay, I'll figure out another way. But no, I think it's just staying the course. I think with marketing, sort of the rules in marketing is a lot of consistency and co-marketing and thinking of ways to partner with other groups and always help others along the way is a good way to kind of keep the spirit of things up. But I think it's going to be a good year. We have a lot of things coming up, a lot of things on the plate. So
we're fortunate in that we have a really strong art community here, and it's very supportive.
Oh my gosh. When I moved here, I really didn't know. I didn't move here because of that. In fact, I would have thought the Bay Area would have been stronger, but that's not the case. It's special here. It's pretty cool.
It's an art mecca.
It's an art mecca. It really is. I know people out of like Michigan who reach out all the time and have visited here and who want to come back just to see the art. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think, Colorado's always had a really rich history in the art world. But I was talking with Bill Thomason, the owner of Bit Factory Gallery.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, I really feel like, we've been trying to get traction as a city for a long time, but I think we're finally coming into our own, and people are discovering that this is a destination. When you're talking about art and the arts and the quality of museums and galleries and everything else that's going on in this city, we're really fortunate of what's going on right now. And people like yourself are leading the way.
I'm in awe of how hardworking so many of my friends in this world work. I mean, just, Brett Matarazzo and Michael and Forge, just the amount of dedication and effort that goes in, and putting this stuff on it's hard work. It's really hard work. And it's awesome because it seems like people are just keeping the momentum going, and it's really exciting to be part of that.
I want to talk a little more business with you. You mentioned that you were doing these shows where you traveled, and we've talked to a lot of artists that do this, the festival circuit.
Yeah.
How much of that did that play into selling your work?
A lot. And the first couple of years. So I did, and I want to say I did maybe 7 shows the first year, including Oklahoma and Jackson Hole, which was the farthest that I traveled. There are a lot of people that do 20 shows a year. I know people that do that many, and they travel all over the place. And I'm in awe of them. You have to have a good setup. Your art needs to travel pretty easily. I work in big scale. And again, I work with Encaustic, which is really tricky. You cannot leave that in a car or a truck in the sun. And getting it all in my SUV is difficult. So I've opted to do less of that. Local shows I will absolutely do. And in Colorado, I'll do them. But the first couple of years, it was a big part of my business. And frankly, I may be losing some business by not doing more of them. It's just, I think that you can choose your model. And as long as you choose your model and stick with the model, that it can work well. And my model is to do more on Instagram. I'm really dedicated to sending out newsletters. They really work well. I often sell work from a newsletter where I just add a few images at the end. So for me, constant and consistent marketing works well enough. And that's just going to have to be the way I roll.
So you do a newsletter, and I was going to ask you about that, which is, I'm glad you mentioned that. Mm-hmm. And then it sounds like you're pretty active on social media as far as posting stuff. You sell a lot of work via social media?
I sell a fair bit. Yeah, I do. I learned from my jewelry days and doing a lot of shows that you never hang your hat on one event or one posting or one, somebody may come around and inquire about a piece, and they might not buy it, but then a year later they will, and they'll buy 2. So it's a constant buildup of, more following, more interaction with people. So it's not just how many followers you have on Instagram, it's how much interaction do you have, and how curious you are about people that are collecting, and do you want to have a dialogue with them? And so it's putting time into that effort that really pays off. And yeah, I sell more from Instagram than my website. My website needs a big overhaul. And like many people, I just don't spend as much time there as I do on Instagram. It just pays off more. But it's a landing pad. It's just that most of the work on there is already sold. And so, and I haven't really gotten around to building a store, but I'm kind of looking at that. The other thing I'm going to embark on with Michael and maybe Brett Fox and some other people this year is building. We've kicked around ways to sell our prints, but building an Etsy store just because the vehicle's in place. My belief around Etsy is, or any shop like that, is it's all comes down to customer service. So your communication has to be spot on. You need to ship when you say you're going to ship. Things need to come the way they need to come. And then you give it some time. And not only is it a great way to advertise your original art, but it's a nice way to make some extra money too. So
you do sell prints of your work then?
I do. I haven't formally done it, but I have some. And at YARDART, I sold some, and they're nice for people to have. But, a lot of times you'll find that those people will come back and buy an original later. So it's great. It's a great thing to sell. I mean, I always think it's interesting because, what I try to do is I make them in a format where people could go get a frame at a Michael's if they want to. But in general, if you have to then go frame it, that's a lot of extra money too. So the original art sometimes makes more sense because it's hang ready. But prints are nice for people. So yeah, I do some.
Do you have gallery representation in addition to all this? You're talking about having a lot of different irons in the fire, different revenue streams.
Yeah, one gallery in Taos called RB Ravens has represented my Native American Encaustics. They really trade in Native American work. Ray Trotter, who heads up that gallery, has become a friend, and he really liked my work. And actually, it was really fun because he is really in with the Native American culture down there, and lots of friends were Native American. And so he believed that my work would be well accepted. And that was an interesting conversation, partly because some of the work I did was sort of funny. So I did some pieces I did this piece that's like a love story between a Native American man and woman with butterflies. And she's sort of looking coy and he's looking right at her. And he said, a lot of his buyers are Native American collectors. And he said that they love kind of the white man's interpretation. And so that was a kind of fun art for him to carry, which was an interesting thing because that kind of gets back into me doing Native American work when I'm not registered Native American. So it's sort of accepted in that way. But he only has carried a few of my pieces. So beyond that, I really don't have gallery representation. If it comes along and it's the right thing and it's the right gallery, then I'd love that. But in the last year, I think I was sort of looking at pursuing that more the year before last. And then last year just didn't make sense.
Collectors, do you have, obviously anybody that buys a piece of art is a collector, but do you have people that acquire your art on a relatively regular basis?
Yeah, I have a number of collectors who have more than 3 pieces. So I would put it that way. And they seem to keep coming back around, and they certainly want to see my newer work. And yeah, so probably not to Michael's scale. I think Michael has more of that. Yes.
How do you go about pricing your work? This is a kind of a thing that we found that's kind of all over the board, and everybody kind of has their own take. So what's your take on pricing, if you wouldn't mind speaking about that?
Yeah, in this business, a lot of it kind of comes down to size, that it just kind of, people can understand that when they see size. So I sort of did it intuitively and then bounced it off people initially. And my prices have gone up. And then I do different kinds of work. So I do an oil painting versus a digital, but the price sort of is the same across the board based on a size. I go kind of by size. And then there are some pieces that I will just price differently because they mean more to me. That's kind of how I've done it. So I have, a piece that's 18 by 24 or 24 by 24, that size is a certain price range. So
where does an original Annie Decamp piece start at and where does it go to?
So, a small piece would be maybe a really 8 by 8 inch piece would be around $190 to $250. The core of my business are pieces that are around 24 by 24, and those are $2,000. When I do about a 36 by 36, that's around $3,500. And then a 48 by 48 is around 5,200.
You work a lot in the square format?
I do because, well, my digital work, because that's kind of the format that my app works in. But then I use other apps sometimes to make that rectangular. And then I paint in rectangular format a lot. The rectangle, 18 by 24 is a nice format for a figurative piece.
If somebody comes to you, say a young collector, and they really love something that's on the larger scale of things, but they don't have $3,500, do you ever work with folks as far as not necessarily pricing, because I don't ever think that you should discount your work, but do you offer some kind of a plan where they could give, like, say, half down and then, pay each month on it until it's paid off?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do discount my work, especially to young collectors. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, I canceled a show I was planning down at the Dairy Block called 29 Lives. And I have children. My daughter, Grace, is 27 and my son George is 25. And they both collect art because they've been around me for a long time. But one of my son's friends came to me once and said, will you help me start collecting art? And I thought, I absolutely will. And I gave him, screaming deals on art and probably something for free because I'm that way. And so I decided to start a show called 29 Lives, where there would be 29 artists offering at least 29% off all their art for anyone 29 or under. And I had Miller Coors on board, and I had a DJ, and it was going to be a big party. And then I was going to discount my work like 50%. For anyone that age group. So it would just start at 29%, but artists could go lower, and most artists will. But the idea is that I really want to start encouraging young collectors to start collecting art and get it in their hands and have them enjoy it for years and learn the love affair they can have with not only art they acquire over time, but with the whole art world, and break down the barrier of them meeting the artist and feeling comfortable in that scene. And unfortunately, I had to cancel it. So we pushed it then back to the fall, and then we had to cancel it again. So one of these days, I'm going to find the energy to do that. But I would really like to start an annual event that helps build young collectors.
I love the concept, I hope you revisit it, because I think it's like I said, it's phenomenal. The idea behind it, and trying to get younger folks to collect art.
Yeah, me too.
Are you a pretty frugal person?
No.
Okay. So when you make a big sale, or you sell, a bunch of art, say from YARDART or what have you, what do you do with your money when you get a big paycheck?
I save it. I mean, I wasn't always frugal. I am now. So let's put it that way. By nature, I am not frugal. By need, I am frugal. So I will give myself the opportunity to spend 10% of a big sale on me. And then the rest I put away.
So what does that look like? What's that 10% look like?
So if it's $500, you mean what would I spend it on?
Yeah.
Maybe shoes. Maybe a really nice candle, maybe some really good food, maybe go out, maybe take my son out to dinner, something like that.
Right on.
Shoes are always in the mix, though. I still love shoes.
I had this feeling that you were going to say that shoes was in part of that equation there. So
yeah,
shoes, I had to chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, shoes are definitely, I have a love affair with shoes for sure.
Shoes, I do too.
Yeah.
And I have this weird fetish with women's shoes, because women's shoes are always so much cooler than men's shoes.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys get cool boots, and just, I can appreciate, and I don't have like a closet full of women's shoes, but.
Oh, come on. I thought we were talking honestly.
Well, I do,
today.
But they're my wife's shoes. So.
That you try them on.
Oh, maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
I kind of picture him laying in bed when Barb's not around with all her shoes around him. When you say fetish, that's shoes. What you get. That's right. I'm going to curl up with these stilettos.
Awesome.
That's so funny.
Yeah. I have a pair of canary yellow Gucci's that I love. and I'm not ashamed to say it.
You shouldn't be.
But I bought them with my hard-earned money. So
there you go.
Yeah.
I used to give my wife a lot of grief about her shoes, but I think now I've eclipsed her because I like comfortable shoes, and I like shoes that, I can wear all day and my feet don't hurt. So mine are more practical, but they're probably not as cool as Gucci shoes.
Probably not, especially if they're Crocs. Are you wearing Crocs?
No, I wear stuff like Merrell's or
Merrell's. Okay.
Yeah, some kind of like the hiking shoes. So
non-plastic shoes.
Yeah. We'll start to wrap this up here. Wes, do you have any questions that you want to?
I'm still stuck on fetish with shoes. So
I had a feeling that was going to grab you, Wes Brown.
I'm all about fetishes, and well, maybe not so much shoes, but I do know a lot about shoes. Jimmy Choos and Christian Louboutins, you bet. The big red soles.
Yeah.
You watch enough Sex in the City, you know about shoes.
You know shoes. Okay. Let's do a podcast on shoes.
That's right. Oh, another interesting idea. That would be kind of funny.
It's art.
Yeah. No, I guess I don't because I've been stuck on fetish.
You're stuck there now.
You got my ears perked up.
Oh, Wes Brown, you never cease to disappoint.
I know. It's one of those moments that I may regret later.
Yeah. As we're having the conversation the night before this releases.
Right.
Should we keep the shoe part in there or not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like a 2-hour conversation.
I would be canceled, but
I got to have my wife listen to it. Is this too weird?
I'll tell you.
Bring my daughter, and my daughter has to listen to it. What do you think?
That's a real story. It's a true story. Yeah. When we talked to Adri Norris, we had a very in-depth conversation about race and racism, and there was a section in there I struggled with, and so Todd and I talked, and Barb listened to it, my wife listened to it, and we ended up keeping it in, and we've gotten some good comments. So, but the next, and this is the funny thing, we released it on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. That next day is the day that African-American woman got fired from Teen Vogue. Well, not fired. She resigned from Teen Vogue without ever taking the job. And then my paranoia even went higher. So anyway, So if you haven't listened to that episode, listen to it. It's a good episode. It was great conversation.
You guys are my daily walk now. So
nice. I
love it. Yeah. And it gets me to walk that amount of time. It's exactly the 5-mile loop I do. So it's perfect.
Yeah. And we, Todd and I talk about, sometimes we have to have difficult conversations, but Wes doesn't hold back. Wes says what, as I speak in the third person, like I'm not here.
Suddenly you're in third person.
I say what I feel. I say what, I don't hold back. This is honesty. And as I told Adri, I approach this with love. I mean, it's all about love for me. And if I make anybody feel uncomfortable or question that, I want to back off, but that's my approach. Is I love the conversation. I think it's important, and I approach it with love. So there we go.
Well, we have to have open dialogue, and if the intention is right, then it's okay. But not everybody comes from the same direction on that. Yeah. So I think honesty is more fun.
Right. Right.
I agree. So my final question for you then, Annie, is so what advice would you give someone that wants to be a full-time artist? Maybe they're doing it part-time, maybe, they have another job and then they're doing, coming home and painting at night or what have you. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give a person that wants to be a full-time artist?
Work hard, work regular hours, treat it like a business, find a mentor, and also know why you're doing it. Because I think that, art is fun, and it can kind of be fun as an escapism kind of thing to do. But if you're really going to do it as a business, know that it's one of the harder businesses you're going to choose. So be prepared to really put the time in. Find people that can support you in that, because they're like everything, there are highs and lows, and it's, you get confident, you lose your confidence. You got to kind of stay the course.
Great advice.
Yeah.
How about the whole idea of voice?
A voice?
Yeah, a voice. Like, how do you find your voice, or how do you listen to that thing inside of you to do the work that you should be doing?
Yeah, so that's a good one. So like I said earlier, some days I'm there to make something and some days I'm there to work with materials. So my best days are when I wake up and I feel I know what I want to paint that day, or something's waiting for me. On those days where I'm struggling with that, what I do is I go paint flowers. I go paint something. Oftentimes it's not something that challenges me enough, but it's flowers are marketable for me. I can sell them. So I make more flowers, and then I get back to knowing and having clarity on who and what I want to paint. Those are the hardest days where I'm just kind of dull and I don't know what. On those days, maybe I just need to go take a walk and do something totally different. I don't take time off very often, but if I absolutely don't have a voice that day, then I sort of accept that and know that it'll come. But as we also talked earlier, that getting in motion helps bring that on for me. So that's kind of what I would say about that.
Fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, I love that.
What all do you have coming up? I know you have the show at Red Brick Gallery in Aspen right now with your friend and mentor, Michael Dowling. Mm-hmm. And that show is called?
That's What He Said, She Said, and that's running until May 14th. And then I am in a group show down at the Bridge Gallery, or the gallery on Platt Street, that Michael and Brett Matarasso are curating, and that is a collage show. Potentially, I will have a solo show at that same space, but they're kind of having to juggle a few things with dates, so I'm not sure yet if that's going to happen or not. And then we have an invitational YARDART in April, and then our YARDART start. So the first YARDART that kicks off the summer is in June, on June 16th weekend, Father's Day weekend. And that is in the that is in the Country Club neighborhood.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that anything that has any confirmed dates are in the episode notes for this week. If people want to find you on social media, how do they go about doing that?
At Annie Decamp Art is my Instagram handle, and I post everything very actively. So they can find it there, or they can DM me and I can let them know the calendar, or they can DM me and ask to be on my mailing list, and they will hear from me via emails.
Fantastic. Annie Decamp, I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with us this afternoon and sharing your journey and your advice. It was all very spectacular, and look forward to seeing you again in person here in the near future. And I know when Wes comes down, we'll be definitely making a visit over to the studio. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This is such a pleasure.
Yeah. And I have to say, I signed up for your newsletter, so I'm excited about getting that while we were speaking here. And I love the Native American stuff. My daughter is half Native American, and so I gravitate towards that stuff as well. And I live in South Dakota, and I really love the history. And so I love your artwork. I can't wait to see you in person, and it's going to be a blast to see you.
Likewise, you guys.
I feel like I just made a friend.
I do too. Thank you. More friends, the merrier. Great to talk to both of you guys.
Thank you so much.
Nice to talk with you. And on that note, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown. Have a great week.
This episode is dedicated to the memory and inspirational life of our friend, artist Bob Ragland.